Hi, it's Katrina.
Number 10. Inca Mummy of the Andes. Climbers discovered something gruesome and shocking high in the Andes Mountains of South America. At the top of Mount Uyayaco, they came across remains of an almost perfectly preserved Inca girl wrapped in a blanket. This discovery was made in Argentina, and the preserved girl looked as though she had been frozen just hours before the team of researchers found her. In truth, she had been sitting on top of that mountain for roughly 500 years. She was part of the Inca civilization and was one of 3 children taken to the peak of the volcano at about 22,000 feet. And there, she and the other 2 children were drugged with cocaine and alcohol before being placed inside of a small cavern under the ground and left as sacrifice. The deaths of these children were part of an obscure Inca ritual. They were sacrificed for something scientists have only ever been able to speculate on. Nobody has figured out why the kids were taken to such an insanely high spot on the mountain. Normally, in Inca society, the act of child sacrifice was used to commemorate something important. If a great leader died, children needed to be given to the gods. If there was a great famine and people were dying, the same thing had to happen. And although this was just another part of Inca society, it wasn't taken lightly. Such a sacrifice could only be made with the direct approval of the Inca emperor. Interestingly, the children chosen for such sacrifices were almost always the sons and daughters of local nobility. The 3 children found at the summit of Uyayaco are now considered to be among the best preserved mummies on Earth. Because of the freezing temperatures at the peak of the mountain, the children have never been able to decay, making them better preserved than almost any mummy ever found. Number 9. Wyoming Sky Villages. The Wind River Range is part of the Rocky Mountains, and it stretches 100 miles across northern Wyoming. It goes all the way from the thick forests of Yellowstone National Park to the sprawling grasslands of the Great Plains. The tallest peaks are about 13,000 feet above sea level and contain a landscape of high-altitude summits and tundra, along with the few remaining glaciers in America from the Ice Age. It's within this mountain range that one of the oldest high-altitude settlements in America can be found. The site is known as High Rise Village, and it's 11,000 feet above sea level, extending out from the side of a hill. It would have made living here a diagonal nightmare, like living on the edge of a ski run. And yet it was a huge settlement occupied by the Shoshone people about 4,000 years ago. They lived here until the end of the 19th century, when Europeans dominated the landscape. The site was discovered in 2006 by Richard Adams with the University of Wyoming. It was the first and biggest of over 20 similar settlements in the Wind River Mountains. About 4,000 years ago, this was a prehistoric landscape. There used to be villages and paths winding through the alpine tundra. Several outposts were also located here, and there was plenty of food for everyone to eat. There was a thriving culture of Native Americans, way above the other groups and safe in the natural defense of the mountains. Number 8. Ural Mountains Moose. There is a massive moose hidden in the Ural Mountains of Siberia. It was discovered in 2011 by a group of researchers led by Alexander Shestakov. It came as a big shock because the moose is a geoglyph, and it looks like something you would expect to find grouped in with the Nazca lines of Peru. But this was found high in the rural Siberian mountains, an impressive rock geoglyph stretching 900 feet long. Researchers dated the structure as being built sometime between 4000 and 3000 BC. This makes the geoglyph extraordinarily old. At maximum, it was made 6,000 years ago and is still visible from the air today. Recent excavations unveiled 155 stone tools near the geoglyph, most of which were likely used for digging up or breaking stones. Stanislav Grigoriev from the Chelyabinsk History and Archaeology Institute says the tools appear to have been used by adults and children. The Neolithic people living in the mountains brought the whole community together to participate in the creation of the moose. Entire families and their tiny children helped dig trenches 30 feet wide, then filled them with stone to create the outline of the moose. Still, the geoglyph is a massive mystery, since nothing like it has ever been found before in the region, and archaeologists don't understand what the purpose of such a gigantic stone creature was. Number 7. Masada. 1,300 feet above the Dead Sea in Israel is an ancient stone fortress. It's sitting atop a rocky mesa, a high-altitude plateau overlooking a vast landscape full of lost history from the days of the Bible. The ancient fortress is called Masada, and it's one of the most important World Heritage Sites in the entire world. Masada's significance has to do with the Jewish people and their Roman enemies. In the 1st century BC, Herod the Great, the king of Judea, built Masada as a castle complex for himself. Then, when the Romans took over several decades later, the fortress became a last stand for the Jewish people. The Romans annexed Judea and built a garrison inside King Herod's fortress. However, then came the Great Revolt of 66 AD. A group of angry Jewish people, tired of being subjugated, stormed Masada and took over the mountain complex. Unfortunately, the rebels were outnumbered by the Romans. The leader, named Menahem, was murdered, and Jerusalem was destroyed. The few rebels still alive at Masada were then hunted down by the Romans. The 960 surviving rebels were soon under siege by a legion of 8,000 Romans. After several months stuck inside the castle, the Jewish rebels had no hope of escaping. When it became clear they were about to meet their fate at the hands of the Romans, they flung themselves off the side of the mountain to prevent the massacre. Masada was then abandoned and was turned into a monastery. In the 7th century, the fortress was deserted again, and the site wasn't rediscovered by archaeologists until 1828. Number 6. Lot's Monastery. In the Bible, God agreed that he would spare the people of Sodom from destruction if he could only find a few decent human beings among the sinners. But this was a difficult task, and the only good-natured souls he found were those of Lot and his family. And so God destroyed the city of Sodom and all the sinners inside with a great fiery blast. After the destruction of Sodom, Lot and his family fled and sought shelter in a mountain cave. The exact cave in which the biblical family took refuge can be found today near the Dead Sea in Jordan, close to the modern town of Safi. This is where archaeology and the Bible come together. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of human habitation around the cave dating to the 1st century BC. This suggests that during the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, there was a primitive Bronze Age presence here. Then, in the 5th century, a monastery was built within the cave to honor Lot and his family. The only thing missing is evidence that Lot himself lived in the cave. All we've really been able to discover is that some people lived nearby, and that Lot's secret cave was a sacred place of worship for the Christians and the Muslims until at least the end of the 9th century. It was around then that the monastery was abandoned. Number 5. Ellora Mountain Caves. The Ellora Mountain Caves, also known as Ellora, is a sacred site in India dating back to about 1,500 years ago. The caves are all part of one major archaeological site, but they are spread out within the Sahyadri Hills. There are a total of 35 caves, each one filled with spectacular monuments to either Hinduism, Buddhism, or Jainism. Ellora is one of the most impressive rock-cut architectural wonders in India. Most of the caves are natural, but many have been widened and improved upon to make them more impressive. The most spectacular thing about them is that they contain various statues and decorations. The earliest cave, which dates back to the 6th century AD, celebrates Hinduism and is known as the Hindu Ramesvara. It's loaded with vestibules and high-relief friezes, and great carvings showing scenes from the Hindu sacred text called the Puranas. Another cave has spectacular carvings of river goddesses on its exterior, with a massive dancing Shiva inside, along with an image of the buffalo demon king. We can also see in these mountain caves how religion changed throughout the centuries in ancient India. Most of the carvings are decorated in Hindu reliefs starting in the 6th century. However, there are Buddhist caves that appear in the 7th and 8th centuries. These caves have figures of Buddha instead of the mythological figures from Hinduism. The preferred religion of the area depended on who the king was at the time, and so it was frequently switched back and forth. Number 4. Monte Alban. Monte Alban is one of the biggest ceremonial sites found anywhere in Mesoamerica. It's only exceeded in size by Teotihuacan, which is located near Mexico City. This is quite impressive considering the sheer number of ritual hubs found throughout the old kingdoms of the Toltec, Maya, Aztec, and Olmec. The mysterious mountain ruins here contain some of the oldest writing in all of Mexico. There are strange rock engravings called danzantes that show humanoid beings with weird features. Between the bizarre carvings and the almost hieroglyphic script, some have suggested the people of Monte Alban had contact with a culture from the other side of the world. What we do know based on archaeological excavations is that the original buildings of Monte Alban were built around 1000 BC. However, it's unclear who exactly built them. This is because about 900 years later, the Zapotecs showed up and destroyed the original buildings, constructing their own structures on top of them. The astronomical observatories and huge pyramids standing at Monte Alban today are the newest features of the site, built over the ruins of even older buildings. Number 3. Termessos. Solimões was an Anatolian god worshipped in ancient Turkey. He was later identified with the Greek god Zeus and was worshipped by the cult of Zeus Solimões. This was typical in many parts of the ancient world. One deity would become popular in a place far from its original home, and it would be merged with the local gods to create a kind of super god. This god is associated with the city of Termessos. It was built and inhabited by a group called the Solimi, who derived their name from the god Solimões. These people, little more than a small tribe in ancient history, built this city around 2,000 years ago in the Taurus mountain range. Sadly, this is all we know about the ancient tribe and their city. The only historical account we have comes from the Anabis of Alexander, written by Arian of Nicomedia while Alexander the Great was still alive. In the ancient text, it says that Alexander surrounded the mountain city of Termessos in 333 BC, but he failed to capture it. Alexander said the city was like an eagle's nest, sheltered in the mountains, and impossible to take for himself. The conqueror eventually left the city to its own devices, and in 71 BC, the people of Termessos became allies of Rome. Its population reached a maximum of about 150,000 residents. But by the 5th century AD, the whole place was abandoned. Its position in the mountains proved unwise, as the whole city was brought to ruin by an earthquake. Number 2. The Hall of Records. There is a place in the United States that looks like something you would expect to find in the mountains of old Persia. It's called the Hall of Records, and it's located at Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. Carved in stone behind the head of President Abraham Lincoln is a massive chamber which contains all the history of America up until the presidency of Teddy Roosevelt. While this isn't an ancient archaeological site, it most certainly will be in the future. If the American civilization ever collapses and Mount Rushmore falls to pieces, this vault will be discovered thousands of years from now. People in the future will uncover a mysterious time capsule within a 70-foot cavern blasted out of the mountainside using dynamite in 1938. Oddly enough, shortly into the project, the mastermind behind it, Gutzon Borglum, died unexpectedly. His plan was to create a deep vault holding a copy of everything from the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution, with the vault accessible by a huge staircase winding up the mountain. However, after he died in 1941, the government decided it wasn't worth it to preserve history for the future. They didn't want to spend the money, so they abandoned the project. It wasn't until 1998 that 16 porcelain panels were sealed inside of a titanium vault within the Hall of Records. The vault was then covered by a granite slab and sealed for eternity. The Hall of Records is closed to the public, but it will be an incredible discovery for people in the future who stumble upon it. Number 1. St. Hilarion Castle. St. Hilarion Castle is the ancient mountain fortress that Walt Disney supposedly used as inspiration for the castle in the Disney classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This ancient building is positioned on the top of a mountain overlooking the city of Gurney in Cyprus. While the castle is little more than a decrepit ruin these days, with its towers crumbling and its roof long since collapsed, it isn't hard to see where Disney got his inspiration from. Long ago, this place really was a fairy tale castle. St. Hilarion Castle gets its name from a hermit who supposedly fled to the top of the mountain following the Arab conquest of the Holy Land. Legend has it there was originally a monastery here that was built in his honor, but no archaeological evidence of such a thing has ever been found. The castle itself was likely built between the 10th and 11th century by the Byzantine Empire, and then was used as a fortress during the Crusades. Cyprus was one of the most crucial strategic military outposts throughout the Crusades because of its convenient location in the Mediterranean Sea. The fortress was built to command the road leading from Kyrenia to Nicosia. It was first used as a defense against Arabian pirates, but then it became a summer residence for French royalty before being abandoned and dismantled in the 15th century. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time for more videos like these. Bye!